I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I'm kind of sad about these changes, but I'm also more convinced than ever that it's because of these changes that this is going to be the temple of prophecy. As someone who loves history and temples and the ritual drama aspect of our temples, the idea that we're going to be taking out the murals and the progressive room structure of the Salt Lake Temple does hurt me a little bit. I feel like there was something tangibly beautiful and ancient about progressing through an architectural and spiritual heavenly ascent back to the presence of God. But I can be sad about this change and yet recognize that the divine prophesied purpose of this temple goes far beyond my own nostalgia or historical interests. This temple is here to change the world. As part of this newsroom article, it revealed new details about the renovation. The progressive 5-room structure of the endowment session will be replaced with 5 separate endowment rooms that will be stationary except for using the veil room or terrestrial room at the end. And everything will be experienced through a film presentation instead of with live actors, and the historic murals will not remain in the temple. The murals themselves simply physically couldn't be preserved while making the necessary structural, safety, and accessibility upgrades to the temple, so they're going to remove what they can to be kept and displayed in the church history library. The capacity is pretty drastically expanding. The temple is going from 1 to 2 baptistries. It's going from 13 to 22 sealing rooms. And as previously noted, it's going from 1 to 5 simultaneous endowment sessions. But here's why, despite feeling a sense of loss, why I ultimately believe this is both inspired and necessary for God's purposes. This version of the temple is the temple of prophecy. This is the temple that's going to stand through the millennium. Isaiah prophesied that in the last days, the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the tops of the mountains and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. Isaiah's most immediate context was referring to the Jerusalem temple, but Latter-day Saints have prophetically applied this to the house of the Lord established in the Rocky Mountains. But the Salt Lake Temple, as it had previously existed, couldn't fully realize its potential. At most, it could accommodate about 200 people in a single endowment session, and it was very limited in its accessibility to all nations. The performative nature of the live acted endowment meant that it was less accessible to people with hearing impairment, mobility restrictions, and without a knowledge of English. Transitioning the experience of these sacred ordinances to film means that the flagship temple of the church will be the most accessible to anyone who wants to come from any nation and worship in the house of the God of Jacob, as Isaiah prophesied. I'm guessing, just spitballing here, that capacity is going to be increased from about 200 at a given time to easily over 600 per hour, depending on what their rotating session schedule is going to be. And it's going to be available with subtitles for the hearing impaired and in over 90 languages. Even from a historical perspective, I think there are some encouraging changes here, because they're upgrading the more disjointed and austere-looking architecture from the 1960s renovation to a more seamless Victorian-era aesthetic from top to bottom, end to end. And you just know that the church is going to make this the largest and most elaborate open house in history. When this temple was first dedicated in 1893, there weren't very many people who were allowed inside before it was dedicated and sealed off from the public. I believe that when this temple's completed, all nations will flow unto it to see what's inside. And those who feel inspired to join us will, as Isaiah said, go up to the mountain of the Lord to learn of God's ways and walk in his covenant path. To learn more, read this article at the Church Newsroom.